Hello out there. Thank you for joining me, for pressing play, for downloading, subscribing, all of the things on today's podcast. I've got Kevin Richberg and Bill Boyle, two of my very good friends from this community, the stand-up community, to talk about the horrific fires raging in California and much more, the oligarchy forming in America. Richberg and Boyle. Rich Boyle. Boyleberg. You can jump to that if you'd like. It starts at 32 minutes into today's show. But I also have an important message, I think, to start off the show. Something I want to say. I want to yield a little time for myself here at the top. I want to try to give name to my feelings and hope that it helps begin a conversation that I look forward to having with you at tonight's Hangout. Today is a really great day for the Hangout and an essential reminder of why this community is so important to me, and I know many of you, because I know we want to come together and talk about what's happening in California. But I just have to say something that I think will begin that conversation and gives me a way to name my feelings, and hopefully you permission to name yours similarly. Hopefully this resonates. Sometimes you're feeling a bit down, and there's the obvious reasons, and then there are other reasons around it that you're not always positive, but I think generally I feel slightly better upon the realization and recognition of what causes me to feel anger or sadness or frustration. I feel a little bit better when I know exactly what is the issue here. What is the primary factor of why I'm feeling this way? And I think when we look at these fires or any catastrophic destruction like this, and we see the destruction of people's homes, and as important, we see the destruction of natural habitats where all millions of different species of everything live as well. It's very sad. The loss of life is the saddest. The loss of personal property is the secondary saddest. The loss of schools and places that we love to visit is very sad. And again, if you think about pets and animals and everything, the way I try to keep them centered, it's depressing as hell. And the thing that makes it all more, or the accelerant on the emotional pain that you're feeling around those losses, is the incorrect and the purposeful obfuscation, misdirection, and total bullshit being spread around the fires. That's just too much to take. And I think I didn't quite realize how much emotional pain or frustration that was causing me. You already feel this immense sense of loss and sadness, even when you're in New York State. Because the social media, the internet, and technology, we can see in real time, cataclysmic events happening. And then we can just watch them over and over and over and get addicted to them and let them drip into our vein, where in human generations past, you didn't see the blitz, the firestorm of bombs raining down on Europe. You didn't see the photographs coming out in real time, day by day, from concentration camps and so on. I mean, when people see this kind of horror, we as human beings, because we're human, we're affected. But when other people blame all of the wrong reasons for why it's happening, specifically Trump talking about Gavin Newsom and the Endangered Species Act and a smelt fish and renewable energy, as well as Scott Jennings and plenty of people on the right blaming DEI initiatives and the fact that there's, it's always, no matter what, there's too many black people involved working. And if we hadn't just given the job to the most qualified person, this wouldn't have happened. As opposed to, of course, all of the real reasons, which is climate change and the fact that there's tons of human beings in densely populated structures living next to each other, and water pressure issues, and all the nuance and litany of causes and effects that are real. Well, yeah, those things are just too much. That's too much. That's when you got to punch out, you got to take a break, you got to get centered. And that's what I was trying. I mean, I haven't been able to do it. Let's be honest. I'm still in the rage phase because I'm just going through clips and putting the show together. But that's the effort. That's the goal. And hopefully I can do that today. I yesterday went for a walk in the woods. It's crazy to see California on fire, and we're freezing here in most of the country, really. But went for a walk in the woods with Zats, and it was wonderful. We really had an awesome time, as we always do, a great conversation, as we always do, plenty of laughs, as we always do. And so I encourage you to do whatever you can today and any day that this happens. And there are going to be a lot of days. There are going to be a lot of days that this happens with Donald Trump back in charge and behind a microphone and a camera all day, every day. So let's take care of ourselves and let's take care of each other by doing our best to recognize what exactly is happening and not let it take too much of our time, too much of our heart. And most importantly, this can cause real problems for you. Anywhere you live, you see this horror on the news, it makes you feel a way. Then you see the blame and the rhetoric and the bullshit around it, and that makes you feel an even worse way. And then your kid comes home from school completely unawares, but having their own set of issues and things that happened today, but you're not there for it. You're not present for that and able to be there to, have the appropriate reactions. And you may very well have an inappropriate reaction with anybody in your life at work or in family as a result of all this. And we have to try to get a grip around that. So I want to work with you on ways that we can do that and ways that I can do that. And so that'll be one effort that we'll continue to try to make for ourselves and for each other. I do not want to give my power, my happiness, my joy away for nothing, for some cheap, momentary trigger or catalyst. I can't let him or anyone steal my mental and emotional health in that way. Life is challenging enough. There is plenty of suffering without giving away what we're trying so mightily to hold on to. So that's my message. I'd love to know what you think. It's just the beginning of a conversation. I like to think I'm good at starting the conversation, saying things, asking questions, in this case, naming feelings that start the conversation. And then I want somebody else to jump in, somebody smarter, somebody with a different perspective, somebody that can help me understand the way I'm feeling, why I'm feeling this way, what if there's anything I can do to do about it at all, to deal with it, to manage it. And there's so many guests that come on the show that do just that. And I plan to have this conversation later this week with more of those types of folks as well. I'm very excited to share my conversation with Kevin and Bill, and that's coming up. But first, I've got your good stuff, which hopefully will take your mind off of it. Sorry to start in such a serious way, and then maybe wrestle your emotions over to the good stuff. I'm actually just going to read a couple of poems. People really liked my reading of the Mary Oliver poem the other day, so I'm going to do that, I think, and then we'll get to news. And if you want to jump to the headlines, you could do that right now. That starts at 12 minutes in. All right, but I'm going to start your good stuff in the best possible way ever with Mr. Rogers. How about that? Yeah, because I think that these horrible fires in California and so many of the other things happening in the world, we need to be reminded by one of my heroes and probably one of yours what's important when we talk to our kids, first of all.
Hello, I'm Fred Rogers. Some parents wonder how to handle world news with their young children. Well, we at Family Communications have discovered that when children bring up something frightening, it's helpful right away to ask them what they know about it. We often find that their fantasies are very different from the actual truth. What children probably need to hear most from us adults is that they can talk with us about anything, and that we will do all we can to keep them safe in any scary time. I'm always glad to be your neighbor.
Aw, Yeah, there you go. For any of you who have kids or grandkids or are around kids, and I think that applies. It's good advice for all of us as well. And, of course, there's always this one.
You know, my mother used to say a long time ago, whenever there would be any really catastrophe that was in the movies or on the air, she would say, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers, you know, even just on the sidelines. That's why I think that if news programs could make a conscious effort of showing rescue teams, of showing medical people, anybody who is coming into a place where there's a tragedy, to be sure that they include that. Because if you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope.
Yeah, I love that. It works for me every time. Fred Rogers, the legend. And how about this for an appropriate poem? There are certain species of wildflowers that only bloom after a forest fire. All that death and ash, the burning, opens up a space for the sun to reach in where it never could before. And in the charred earth, those seeds crack open, they unfurl, they grow, they lift up their faces and soak in the light. That poem was written by Lauren Prophet Smith, and I think it's a good metaphor for what happens after a tragedy. Sometimes the lotus flower grows out of the mud, or in this case, the ash. All right, well, that is the good stuff that I've got for you today. Sorry, I don't have more, but there's only just so much time in a day, and I'm always looking for it. So please send me your good stuff in your life or things that you're reading, seeing, or think I should share right here in each day's stand-up daily broadcast. But now it's time for your headlines. Here are the headlines that I've gathered for you today. Obviously, the top story is the cataclysmic, apocalyptic fires and images that we're seeing coming out of Los Angeles. And I'll come back to that with some statistics and clips and so on. But in other news, yes, there was other news. The former and future President Trump asked the Supreme Court to block a sentencing in the New York election interference case involving falsified business records, the hush money case. And guess what? To ensure he gets the outcome, he apparently jumped on the phone with Supreme Court Justice old Samuel Alito, who would be weighing in on that decision a day before under the Samuel Alito says he was just calling Trump to make a recommendation for a job recommendation. I'm sure that's all they talked about. I mean, just absolutely outrageous. And of course, if this were Biden, Hillary, Obama, etc., Trump would all caps it till 3 a.m, demand investigations into all of them while also dehumanizing all parties for effect, just calling them sick and so on. Nope, but that's what he was doing. He was on the phone with Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, who's going to decide whether or not Trump's emergency petition to block a sentencing in New York hush money case, which is scheduled for Friday, can happen. So there's that. That was a pretty big deal yesterday. Also, in Justice Mattering, the Justice Department planned to publicly release part of Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report on Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and disenfranchise millions of voters. So it looks like we're going to see that. Yesterday, we also found out about a watchdog report that found 3 senior Trump-era Justice Department officials leaked details about COVID-19 nursing home death investigations in Democratic states to actually have influence in the 2020 presidential election. So that's pretty crazy to learn. Filed this under every accusation is an admission. We learned yesterday that Trump got the questions for a town hall on Fox News last year from a Fox employee ahead of time. Again, something he would have been raging about had the shoe been on the other foot. He would have been right to. That's horrible and totally corrupt and wildly unsurprising. But of course, every accusation is an admission. In a new interview, President Biden, who by the way just became a great grandfather, insisted that he could have beaten Trump in the 2024 election while acknowledging he wasn't sure that he could have actually completed the full second term. He said, who the hell knows, or some Joe Biden-esque thing like that. Yesterday, we learned that when Republicans tried to impeach President Biden, they rested their case on a criminal and a liar who is now disgraced former FBI informant Alexander Smirnov. You got to read about the story if you don't already know about it. That guy falsely accused President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden of taking a $10 million bribe from Ukraine, and he made it all up. And they rested their whole case to impeach him, and there were millions of hours on Fox News and right-wing media talking about this horrible crime. Guess what? Alexander Smirnov made the whole thing up, and now he's been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Bye-bye. I'm sure he'll get a pardon. Trump's imperial territorial grab ambitions rattled global politics. Greenland had to insist it was not for sale. Mexico's president had to joke that the U.S. is actually who should be renamed, not the Gulf of Mexico, but they should rename the U.S. Mexicana Americana, is what the Mexican president said, which is an amazing, masterful troll by her. A serious constitutional crisis is taking place in North Carolina. Follow Mark Elias' Democracy Docket for more details on it. But in North Carolina, Republicans are trying to steal a state Supreme Court election by disenfranchising 60,000 voters after the count and recount have shown that the Democrat won. And finally, Obamacare hit a record with nearly 24 million Americans signed up for plans under the program, including my family. The U.S. concluded that Sudanese paramilitary group has committed genocide. And finally, yesterday, 2 blocks from the U.S. Capitol, the Washington Post writes, as the sun set on Tuesday, the public began lining up to say goodbye to Jimmy Carter one last time. They stood in the snow on a dark sidewalk that hadn't been cleared and waited. Some had voted for the former president. Some had come around late to supporting him. Some were born well after he left office. But on a frigid winter night in Washington, D.C., they came from near and far to stand in the line with hundreds of others to honor a public servant, a humble man, a leader. I like the way they put that in the fledgling Washington Post, which also announced like a 4% pay cut, but not the people who wrote that thoughtful passage to open the story about Jimmy Carter being lying in state and the public stepping in to see him and say goodbye. I liked it, so I wanted to end the headlines with that. Now let's get to the clips I've got for you. Let's start with Gavin Newsom talking to Anderson Cooper in the midst of these fires in Los Angeles, because, of course, Trump is blaming all the wrong reasons and wrong people, and so is right-wing media attacking the governor in the middle of a crisis because he just can't stand how much more attention a cataclysmic fire is getting than him, and he's going to remind us every day how despicable of a person he is. It'll be our job to never let it become acceptable or normal because he's a sick, twisted, evil fuck who cares about nobody other than himself. But here is Gavin Newsom responding in a much classier way, the best way I guess you possibly can, without looking without completely ignoring it and looking like he's backing down to Trump. Here it is.
Even asked this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
Finally,
pretty dramatic images, too, with a home literally burning over Gavin Newsom's shoulder in that clip. But, of course, like I've already said a couple times, Trump going after Gavin Newsom and policies that are not even real things, or that he made up, or that he wildly exaggerated or connected to things that shouldn't be anywhere near each other. You've got the dumbest guy on television, Jesse Waters, over on Fox News, blaming the women who are the leadership in Los Angeles because ostensibly they're women and potentially gay. You've got Scott Jennings blaming DEI initiatives on CNN, which was really outrageous. I am going to play that for you you simply because I want you to hear Jasmine Crockett, who was on the panel hammering Scott Jennings after the CNN commentator, and man whose face appears next to the definition of smuggest prick in the world, blamed DEI initiatives for the wildfires in L.A. Here is about 2 minutes from CNN's Newsnight with Abby Phillip last night.
No priorities, because also in California, you might have recall a news story from last year. There was some interest in the fire departments and the firefighters in California, and the interest was that there were too many white men who were firefighters, and we need to have a program in California to make sure we don't have enough white men as firefighters. So we have DEI, we have DEI, we have budget cuts, and yet I'm wondering now, if your house is burning down, how much do you care what color the firefighters are?
You can respond, and then
listen. I am so tired. You know what? There was an article that just came out that said that actually the most educated demographic in this country right now is black women. So let me be clear. Because you are a woman, or because I know that some of the right has been sharing these photos of the fact that I believe that the fire chief may be a woman or something, that has nothing to do with it. We are looking at qualifications. What diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been about is saying, you know what? Open this up. Don't just look at the white men. Open it up and recognize that other people can be qualified. And the fact that we want to, at a time when people are dying, decide that a country of immigrants is failing or people are dying because the same very people that built this country, because the last time I checked, y'all didn't say that anything was wrong with the White House, and I can promise you it was my ancestors that built the White House. So listen, if we have been good enough to build this country, we are good enough to serve and die overseas, we are good enough to serve in other ways. And the fact that people actually decide that they want to engage in public service, whether it's sitting in Congress or whether it's serving on the fire department or the police department, should not be an issue. The fact is, stop trying to act as if only white men are the ones that are capable. Because right now you're sitting at a table with 3 very capable black women.
I'm not. I'm just simply saying that as a matter of public policy in California, the main interest in the fire department lately has been in DEI programming and budget cuts, and now we have this massive fire.
Are we really? But Scott, are we really blaming the fire department? The people in the LA fire department. No,
I'm blaming the Democrats who run the state.
No. But the fire department.
All right, there you go. There was just some of that. That guy, she just hands it to him, which was fun to see. But he seems to be very difficult to in any way fluster and throw off. We have all tried. I've tried in different way. Jasmine Crockett tried in a better, more effective, smarter way, in a completely different vessel than obviously me. In my case, I was a white man calling him a hack. In her case, you heard that. So I know that's probably pretty upsetting to hear, so I'm sorry about that. Didn't mean to raise your blood pressure, but I thought it was worth hearing her, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, hand him and anybody else their ass with the truth, with a much, much better argument in that case. And Abby Phillip's argument as well matters. The truth is, these issues are as complex as many others, and they can't be explained or blamed away in a soundbite the way that you're hearing so many people try to do. But after millions of views spreading these lies about the Palisades firefighters lacking water because of regulations, the boring truth comes later, like usual, and it won't be shared to the same people. But here it is. Basically, reservoirs and water tanks were at normal levels and completely full before the fire. All 114 city water supply tanks were fully stocked pre-fire. A 15-hour surge at 4 times normal demand reduced water pressure. High demand at lower elevations slowed refilling tanks at higher elevations. This unprecedented fire was fueled by 8 months of no rain and 85-mile-an-hour winds. Water is being brought in continuously, even if, like Trump claimed, the protection of the Delta smelt caused over-regulation by California. It's a federal Endangered Species Act that requires a protection of endangered species like the Delta smelt and their habitats, not Gavin Newsom or California. So there is some information aggregated that I wanted to share with you, and I think it's all pretty accurate. You tell me what I'm missing if you've seen other information, of course. Now back to your clips. Here is a Republican congressman named Tony Gonzalez, who comes off to some people as kind of moderate. He's not. He's extreme. He's Trump. He's MAGA. He's ridiculous. But Wolf Blitzer asked him about Trump calling up Samuel Alito the day before Alito would be deciding on his fate. Here it is.
You think it's appropriate for Trump to be speaking with someone who will actually be deciding a case against him?
I do think it's appropriate. He is the incoming president. He's a former president, and very soon he's going to be the current president. So I think, to me, it's a positive thing that President Trump is meeting with the Senate, that he's meeting with the House, that he's willing to have conversations with the Supreme Court. To me, that's what I look for in a president. I want to have more of that dialogue. And the more openness and the more transparency that we can have, I think the better it is for all Americans. I think that's one of the issues that a lot of people were frustrated with the Biden administration, just transparency. Let's just talk about these things. So I think it's very positive that President Trump and his team are having conversations across the board throughout all aspects of government.
Well, do you think Justice Alito needs to recuse himself from this Trump case right now?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, who knows what the conversation they had, but I doubt it was on something like that. There's so many things, so many important issues that need to be discussed, and I'm certain, there's a lot of that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, thanks so much for taking a few
minutes of our time to bullshit us on the top of Bullshit Mountain. Oh, that's horrible. By the way, if you ever hear a Republican or anybody talk about Trump and transparency, just point to the fact that we haven't seen his medical records or his taxes. It's absolutely preposterous. And the idea that he's now going to profit off the presidency and not put all of his assets and investments into blind trusts and so on, it's just not worth really discussing for too much, really, because it's obviously not transparent. All right, here is Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's on CNN with Jake Tapper, talking about President Trump's threats to invade other foreign territories. They are meant to distract us, in this case, from his crazy choices for cabinet secretaries. Here is that.
President-elect Trump was asked if he could assure the world that he wouldn't use military or force or economic coercion to assume control of Greenland or the Panama Canal. This is what he had to say.
I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security.
Your response, Senator.
So I'm going to do this one at two levels. The first one is the United States respects international law. We respect the boundaries of other countries. We expect other countries to respect our boundaries. Vladimir Putin, with Russia, did not do that and invaded Ukraine. And we have pushed back hard against that. That is world order. That's international law. But I want to make a second point, and that is, why is Donald Trump doing this? And I think the answer is, let's have a big distraction and several more questions so we don't spend more time on Pete Hegseth, the nominee to be the head of the Department of Defense. So we don't spend more time on Tulsi Gabbard, who has been in the pocket of Putin and is not someone who should be trusted with our secrets, so that we don't spend more time on Robert Kennedy's views on vaccines. In other words, we have a job in front of us right now, and that is advise and consent on the nominees who are there to run our government. Donald Trump would love it if we spend no time talking about them and all of our time talking about this idea and something else.
Well, to be fair to me, I did start with a question about Pete Hegseth. Let me ask you.
Very well done by Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, in that clip. And there should be a lot more of that from all of us. Okay. Now here's more on a similar subject and more from the great Trey Crowder with another one of his car rants. Love this guy. You should follow him, support him, see him live, TreyCrowder.com. Here we go.
Well, I took a couple weeks off to get fat on cookies and spread cheer. And by spread cheer, I mean upset my wife by rage quitting an Uno game after being drawn forward by her sister's 9-year-old. Happy holidays, everybody. Let's do a roundup of what we missed. There's already been major drama in MAGA world over immigration, which is odd because they're usually so even-keeled and reasonable when that subject comes up. Trump owner Elon Musk and noted ring kisser Vivek Ramaswamy came out in favor of expanding H-1B visas for skilled workers, the vast majority of which are from India, and they were stunned to find that the base they worked so hard to enrage through an endless flood of extremely xenophobic anti-immigration propaganda wasn't really super down with having more immigration. Weird how that works, isn't it? Apparently they thought that the base's frothing fear and hatred was limited to immigrants from the southern border. They didn't realize that to your average Trump voter, Indians are just the Mexicans of the East. The base was like, no more immigrants means no more immigrants. And Elon was like, whoa, these are the good kind. They have skills and degrees. So they're white? No, they're not white. No! We were very clear on that. The arguments that Vivek and Elon tried to make were hilarious. They were like, listen, of course we would love to hire Americans for these jobs. It's just that you guys, you're stupid and lazy, like fundamental, like at your core. Like, our hands are kind of tied here. You get it. And weirdly, that didn't go over super well either. And they started getting blasted by the faithful. And they didn't know how to take it, especially Elon. He was very confused. He was like, well, no, I do things and you like those things. It doesn't matter if those things are good for you or not. You like them because I do them. That's how this is supposed to work. And the base was like, turns out the only thing we love more than worshiping a demagogue who appeals to our racism is our racism, baby. Now shut up and build a wall, future boy. It was fun to watch from afar. Also, Trump has said he wants to buy Greenland, annex the Panama Canal, and invade Canada. So 2025 is off to a sane and promising start. He sounds like my cousin back home talking about what he'd do if he won the lottery. It's like, I don't know how much money that's going to be, but I don't think it's going to be enough to buy Kentucky and rename it Kensucky. Like, you can't just do these things. And right now, Trump's followers are real pumped about him buying Greenland, but I feel like most of them think Greenland is filled with white women dressed as elves petting reindeer and shit. Whenever they find out that Greenland is 90% indigenous, the base is going to be like, did Vivek put you up to this? We all know how much he loves other Indians, right? They're going to be mad. I feel like as long as he's out there saying patently absurd things that have no chance of actually happening, it's kind of funny. Like, to me, he might as well be out there like, we're going to put a Walmart on the moon. We're going to bring back horse war. You remember lawn darts? Mandatory in all preschools. You're welcome, America. Like, it's silly. Either way, look, this year is barely a week old. Trump ain't even in office yet, and it is already full bunch bananas around here. So buckle up, y'all, because unless your New Year's resolution was to scream into more pillows, it's about to be put to the test. Happy New Year. Love y'all.
Yeah, very well said by Trey Crowder. But now it's time to get to my guests. On today's show, they are valued, loved, and respected members of the stand-up community. And Bill Boyle has been joining me on the show for years, used to call into the show. Kevin Richberg used to tweet at the show. Well, guess what? I have heard so much from them over the years, I decided that they're so smart and such effective communicators. They often talk a lot, and people mostly like what they have to say at the Hangouts. But if you don't, you should push back, and maybe you can join this conversation as well. Bill Boyle owns parking garages in Washington, D.C. He's a businessman. And Kevin Richberg owns a farm in upstate New York. He's a farmer and a scientist who went to MIT and has traveled all over the world to like 130 countries. Anyway, I love these guys. They're good friends of mine. Having them on together is great. And they do it for free out of the kindness of their heart and their own time. So I'm not going to be critical of Bill Boyle's microphone too much, but I'm going to improve on it. He doesn't sound as good as he normally should, but I think it's more than quality enough to air here on the show. Richberg and Boyle. Rich Boyle. Boyleberg. Let's do it. All right. I've got the gents together again. Boyleberg, Rich Boyle, Thunder and Lightning. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. I have a lot of questions and I jump right into it because as we're talking, we're also, everybody in America and probably across the world is watching these fires in Los Angeles, Southern California. We've got a lot of listeners and friends out there. Kevin, you used to live out there, and it's kind of hard to comprehend something in the middle of it, not stopping the future president from criticizing the governor apparently. But apparently 1,000 fires have burnt as of now. This seems different. It's because of the complexity or the the fact that there was so much vegetation from all the rain, and then it was so much dryness, and then there's 80 to 100 mile an hour winds. But it does seem different, Kevin. I think it's because of where it is and the winds and how much destruction is happening so quickly, or is that just my perspective?
No, it's definitely different. It's going to clock in. It's different when it's all said and done. Just a personal connection. As soon as the fire last night started up in Pasadena, which is where I lived for 4 years, I didn't sleep last night. I've been once you're personally invested in something, like, especially with the inability to do anything, I've just been reading this on and off all day. I just said to you before we started that you could have driven from where I lived in Pasadena and been in 7 miles. I was wrong. I just Googled it. It's 2.5 miles. And then I was wrong about something else too. The reason this is going to be a big deal, and that was the question you asked, is because this is happening in Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County has 9.9 million people that live there. That's why it's going to be different. Everyone is going to know something, someone, some structure, something that is not there anymore. And there are some things about this fire that are just logistically difficult that I'm not even sure if they're reporting on yet. If you're in an evacuation place right now and you don't know the layout, the geographical layout of Southern California, there's one way to get out through the north. That is completely closed. Like, if you have decided that your fleeing point from any of these 3, 4 fires that are going on in LA County is you're going to go north on the 5, that is not an option for you right now. If that's the only one you're familiar with, there's just so many. I mean, that's where my mind is going. My mind is 1,000 things a minute trying to take in every new thing that comes. They say 1,000 structures. They know 1,000 structures have already burned. I would not be surprised if that turns into 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 or more.
Well, they're also running low of water. It just popped up on my phone that they're having trouble getting enough water pressure now to the fire because it's so big. I have friends in Thousand Oaks who are watching it over the hill or hills between them. And, what's happened to this fire is that it is much worse and much faster than they used to be already because of greater drought, because of people refusing, for instance, in LA, to chaining themselves to their eucalyptus trees, which are like invasive, and B, they're like Roman candles when they light up. It's the long, sad story of Americans refusing to do what they should do, obviously, to mitigate these dangers. And that's not even getting to the level of talking about climate change, but even just local things that you can do to make it better.
So what is the reaction? You mentioned this right before I hit record. Trump is being critical of Governor Newsom, and
actually Governor Newscum is how he referred to him. And he made some dumb comment about how Newsom would have had more water in the area, but he wanted to protect smelts, which are, I think Trump said something like some lame or dumb fish. Bottom line is that regardless of whatever dumb issue Trump is bringing up, it's that he's using this as an opportunity to attack a politician who's right in the middle of trying to handle an enormous disaster and has no desire to help or make it better or easier for Newsom. And, the anti-Jimmy Carter, put it that simply.
Wow,
Trump is going to do the evil, shitty thing every time for the next 4 years.
Crazy to think for any normal person that when something is unfolding, a disaster unfolding before your eyes, you're criticizing, in this case, the people that should be focused on saving lives and homes and pets and so on. But he needs the attention to be not on the fire, but on him. And we're reminded about that yesterday. And before I get into, and that's yesterday during that press conference, I was like, it might be interesting to invite Richberg and Boyle on and talk about that. But I want to know how to cover Trump, how he should be covered for any mainstream outlet, and how we're supposed to interpret it. I feel like studying authoritarian rise and fascism and all that's helpful right now to understand what he might be doing in terms of the way that he talks, because, he talks about two things that are really distracting and yet important, and we probably need to examine them. Meanwhile, the next words are some insidious lie that is causing damage. It's a very hard thing to understand how to talk about. And for me, mentally, emotionally, and others, it's just hard to imagine that we have to do this again. And so where do we start?
So I think that you have to understand, and everyone needs to understand, that Trump operates all the time on two levels. On the one hand, he is bringing up crazy things, saying crazy things, because that gets attention for him. So, if you're an authoritarian leader, would-be authoritarian leader, you want to just bestride the media, newspaper, internet landscape, so everybody has to pay attention to you. You can drown everybody else out. That's number one. But then number two, what's happening is he's exploring how far we're willing to let him go. And I think that the example that would be the Greenland, Panama,
Gulf of Mexico.
Canada, we're going to take over everybody. Called the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's that those are all markers he's putting down to see how much people will roll over for them. And that's not to say that there is not some calculation in here. Like, he knows that there's a lot of billionaires in the world, more importantly in his circle, who would love to control the mineral resources of a place like Greenland, right? So he's helping out his buddies who are billionaires. That's number one. But number two, he's trying to exert and exercise his power and seeing who will get freaked out and give in. And the way to deal with that is to call it what it is, to not freak out and not to say, oh my God, he's going to do it. It's also not to say, well, it's no big deal. The answer is to characterize it clearly for what it is. And the way that I described it today was, I said, this is similar to Lebensraum, which was the German, Nazi Germany's idea of having living space, which is what Lebensraum means in Eastern Europe. It's this sort of aspirational thing that we're going to take over the whole world and make it all American, or in the German case, find room for Germans to live in the Slavic East. And I think that you just describe it for what it is. You compare it to a historical analogy, and you leave it at that. Because what we discovered was that we're not going to talk people who are idiots out of being stupid. What we really, I'm talking about MAGA people. Yes, I think you're all fucking stupid.
Well, they certainly are about politics.
Right. And what you need to do is make clear to people who are rational, reasonable, right thinking what things are. Because you get the situation where you get people like Tria Parsi, Samuel Moyn, you get all these people, Fetterman to some degree, kind of going, well, look, we think these people are shit, but hey, on this one issue, they're all right. And so we should go along with them on this one issue.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that as a separate conversation in terms of, because that's a really interesting question with those who are willing to work with Trump to get something done. But before we do, Kevin, I want you to react to what you just heard Boyle say about the strategy, whether he knows it or not, how calculated he is. It's hard to know. Somebody comes up to him and says, or somehow gives him an article, most likely one of those billionaires or wealthy people, and says, hey, something Greenland, hey, something Panama Canal, or maybe some political strategist says, let me feed this to him, so he'll feed it out as chum. This will be a great one for the week. And who knows how these very specific places and ideas get generated, Gulf of Trump and all of that. But what are your thoughts on what Bill said and yesterday, the overall reaction to the press conference and how it's covered?
Bill's analysis is correct and taken through a specific lens that I am not going to talk about because I want to add on to what Bill said. The lens that Bill is analyzing this through is, what does the substance of these things mean in the end? And that's a good and necessary way
perceived, how much attention we should give them. Yeah, what does he's saying mean? Right.
But there is a reality here that I know for an absolute fact mainstream media is primed and ready to go for, which is Donald Trump in a vacuum. The words themselves, his mental capacity, his age, and his fitness as a human being, his vocabulary, his reading level, all of those things. In my opinion, there needs to be more reading directly of these transcripts of the things that he says by people into microphones and showing them to everyone in the world. And that's why we're going to do it right now. No right. Nope. No right. Here's what we have. We have a right not to help them with their financial difficulties because we owe $36 trillion too. We're going to start knocking it out pretty fast, but we're going to be able to do it because of energy and other things. But no, no right, no right. But why are we supporting a country $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. What the fuck? Like, they spent years, the mainstream media spent years trying to convince everyone that Joe Biden was a mental invalid in a dementia the likes of which no one has ever seen before. When is the reporting going to come about Donald Trump's mental capacity?
Okay, so I don't buy it. I don't agree with that. I don't think that those two guys are equal in their mental capacity. And I would say Donald Trump has now and never could go talk about any policy intelligently at all. He can't do it. Joe Biden can pretty much every policy. He's obviously a much more intelligent guy. But my interpretation of their mental fitness as a listener, just like Joe Biden half time is unintelligible. And I think he would get lost a lot and so on. I mean,
what I just read intelligible?
Yeah, it wasn't different than anything I feel like Donald Trump has ever, any way he's ever been. I
don't think that's a valid point. Because it's always been happening doesn't mean it's real now.
Fair enough. So I listened to the whole press conference yesterday on double speed, I'll say. And I felt like he did what he always does, which is he had a prepared speech. He went off of it for very long periods of time. You could tell when he'd go back and forth. And then he took several questions from reporters that were in attendance and
didn't answer them.
It sounded like the same guy we've always heard. And I felt like he, to some extent, gets away with the explanations that he gives, no matter how stupid or mean.
Because we allow it as a society.
Well, that's different. How we allow it as a society than evaluating their mental fitness. I feel like they're different things. Maybe I'm not hearing you correctly.
So I would actually disagree with the term of we allow it. We don't. I mean, I hear it, turn the TV off and say it's bullshit. It's terrible. What allows it to work is that a lot of voters hear all that bombast and bullshit and they like it. And so this isn't a question. There are no more gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are gone. And so the idea that Trump is quote unquote allowed to do this stuff isn't really germane.
Who were the gatekeepers? Journalists?
It was when there were three: CBS, ABC, NBC. When the internet came along and just blew this stuff out. Yeah. Pre-internet, there were actual gatekeepers who would have given 3 seconds of the speech and then looked at the camera at 60 million people and said, "This guy's a nut. He's terrible," and that's kind of all people heard, and that would be the end of it. I think that the thing you have to make a distinction between Biden and Trump is that Biden is the fox. He knows a lot of things. Trump is a hedgehog. He knows one big thing. And the one big thing that he knows is that bombast and bullshit doesn't just make those MAGA people happy or give them something to hang their bigoted hats on. What he also does is he provides copy and clicks to media that's in a lot of trouble. Our media is in a lot of trouble, and if they get clicks and they get reactions from this stuff, I'm talking old mainstream media, they're going to report it. Then on top of that, you have Meta, Amazon, TikTok, Telegram, all these guys also make money from it. Our economy is right now designed for big companies to benefit from this stuff.
Yeah,
so,
Chris Hayes has this new book out, Siren Call, about the attention economy and
right.
Yeah.
Trump is selling dopamine, and there's a lot of buyers out there, and that is not a thing that there's. Kevin, you do what I do, which I totally understand. You're like, how can we allow this? But the reality is, our economy supports it and actually accelerates it.
And also, I think that the first point that you made was that when Kevin says, how can we allow it? I mean, it depends on who we are, I suppose. And I think we know who Kevin's talking about. But I think the point that you made, Bill, was, and I heard this yesterday, one of the historian type people talking about it on Greg Sargent's show. Basically, they like it. You just said it, Bill. They like it, Kevin. A lot of people love what he's doing, love the bombast, love the insults during a firestorm against the governor who is trying to oversee it. Love the lies. Love the way that we get triggered by it. They root for it. And they love, apparently, expansionism, which is weird because, not that any Trump supporter MAGA person really understands anything about colonialism, imperialism, or expansionism, or America's traditional foreign policy, or why that won't work. But they sure do love talking about taking other people's shit, taking Canada.
There are consequences. There are consequences this time. This is the real deal. If the last time there were some paper mache guardrails and some popsicle stick batons, those are gone now. And the consequences of all of this that we just talked about are coming. Pray.
Well, I would say that the institutional guardrails are gigantically weakened for sure, but that does not mean that there are reality guardrails that will bite him in the ass and us in the ass. I mean,
for us, the ultimate
destroying NATO is going to have immediate effects.
The ultimate reality guardrail did actually come in the last. The ultimate reality guardrail was death. 1 million people died during COVID. That was a real big reality guardrail that we just plowed right through as a society.
Don't you think, though, that I said this to Rothkopf the other day, too? Nobody I knew or cared about. I don't care about those people. They were strangers.
I did. I knew someone who died as a direct result of getting COVID.
I'm joking. The point, meaning... I love that you're like, I can't.
It was my dad, so I'm sensitive.
No, and Boyle's grandmother or something. I'm saying my point.
5 family members. Actually.
My point was, I care about 1 million strangers who die. I care deeply about that. It profoundly upset when Palestinian kids are dying. It upsets me. I vote on it. I act on it. These things. I'm saying a lot of people don't care. They didn't care. We don't care about other people. The health insurance debates taught me that. COVID taught me that. Climate teaches me that in a lot of ways. So I'm saying a lot of Americans and a lot of Trump supporters, and generally it's a political mindset thing. You don't care about the people you don't know. You don't care about the issues that you don't think affect you.
Well, I mean, eventually you have to. Statistically.
Do you? Because the issue could kill you or affect you, and some right-wing radio host is still going to blame it on some other cause, and then you're like, well, I don't actually care about the bankers.
I don't want to be grim, but I mean, I did go there. The ultimate reality that people run up against is death, is something that physically, or maybe not death, physically harms them to the point where their life is irrevocably changed.
And they still didn't take the vaccine. That's my point. Like, they were so indignant, and
they were dead. It was too late to take the vaccine at that point.
But other people, it wasn't. You know, you'd see people die in your town, and you still would be like, I'm not ever taking that government vaccine, and then you are now dead as well. That's the point. I feel like that's the answer to
something to think about.
They will die. A lot of people will die as a result, or will be punished as a result. And I think that the people you're pointing out, and obviously so upset about that we all are those who support him, and then as a result end up being punished.
Something else to remember too, guys, is that about 15 million people, there's now data out there where people went back and looked at people who actually voted. They talked to people who voted and did a bunch of data analysis of actual voters. This is not exit polling. This is not pre-election polling. It's not guesswork. What they figured out is about 15 million people who were Biden supporters in 2020 did not bother to turn up in 2024. And only 4% of them would have switched to Trump.
It's crazy.
Well, what it means is that basically a lot of people got very complacent, figured Trump was done, lost interest. Maybe they were pissed about immigration. Maybe they were pissed about inflation, and just didn't show up for voting. What that means, though, is that there is a gigantic number of voters out there, literally a gigantic number, who are going to be extraordinarily upset in 2 years.
Will they blame the right cause? Always my question. Who will they blame? What will they blame? Because they'll be told to blame the wrong things by the most powerful voices in media and politics and family.
Trump did a good job, I shouldn't say good, but an effective job of doing that leading up to the 2020 election. And that turned out to be not very useful for him. He lost as an incumbent president in 2020, which is hard to do.
Well, COVID.
And I mean, it's hard to, that was a winnable election, and he lost it despite having blasted the airways and having a money advantage and everything else. So the bottom line is that I think, and remember, Trump is not going to be running again in 2024. 2028. So,
or leaving.
I mean, maybe he tries that. But the point being that there is a significant majority of people in this country who won't stand for it at that
Do you
point.
think it's worth looking, as David Rothkopf said 2 shows ago, at the midterm elections, that if Democrats win back the House, his agenda is in effect done. His presidency is in effect done. We've seen that in history with a lot of other presidents in terms of what you can or can't get done if you don't have control of Congress. And we saw that in his first time as president when Democrats took back the House in a huge way, right? I mean,
Sure.
how likely
I mean,
is that?
the Trump people are basically operating as if they have 2 years.
As they should.
do. Yeah. I agree with Bill on this.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hearing this from people, in D.C. who have connections to McConnell world and whatever. They're like, these guys only have a short period of time to run wild, and then things are going to be real different for them.
Kevin, how sad is it that Boyle doesn't have any connections to Thune world, or he would have mentioned it?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean,
he's still relying on his McConnell friends.
Well, I'm still waiting for myself to go to context to call me.
Yeah. I have to tell you, my contacts with those folks are dated because anyone who's under a certain age is like a BAGA guy, and I'm not going to talk to them. So.
What were you going to say, Kevin, when I crowbarred in my joke about his lack of connection to John Thune, the new majority leader?
I was going to say, you're in the shower 10 times as long. No water comes out of the faucet. You want to wash your hands. They want to go back to even stronger than what they have right now. As you know, I ended that policy. You can have all the water you want. It makes no difference.
He talked about, during that section, and like I said, I listened to the whole speech. When he talked about energy, I paid close attention, and I got really upset and frustrated by what he was saying, because it was very important that people understand. I get so fired up about this. I'm sure both of you do too, is for a lot of obvious reasons. But the way that he doesn't pay any attention to the scientific consensus of climate change, in fact, denounces it, makes people think either it's not happening or it shouldn't matter in the middle of these fires even. And then the way that he talks about the solution of basically, which is fossil fuels, the way he disparages renewable energy, windmills, as he did. But the one thing he said, which was so upsetting to me, is that these renewable energy sources could not exist or survive without subsidies. Never mentioning, of course, that fossil fuels are subsidized, which is why they cost what a gallon of gas costs what it does. Fossil fuels have always been, every single special interest, whether it's fucking windmills or coal, wants those subsidies. They want that government money. They get it or they don't. They live and die upon it. But the idea that he just misleads everybody, misinforms everybody about the problem, much less the solutions. And then he talked about, by the way, that electric heating makes your skin itch. You mentioned that. I wish you could find that.
That was in the paragraph before. We can do that one. I think we're a little bit done with dramatic readings, but
no. What's interesting about all this stuff, though, for Trump is that normally what happens in fascist kind of takeovers is that these party ideologue nuts come in. They get business on their side by protecting them from the Bolsheviks or from the commies or whatever, and then they bring the business people in, and then they overtake the business people. What's different about Trump is that the through line through all of these things is that he's a business guy. And so Greenland, what's Greenland about? Securing mineral rights for his friends and his family. What is the Panama Canal about? Same thing. Canada, same thing. It's the money that comes first for him. So he will ignore the evidence of anything at all if he thinks that he can benefit or his family can benefit financially from it. And why does he hate NATO? He doesn't care about the strategic part of it. It's all this money. Why are you spending all this money? He has this, he thinks about money. He's one of the richest men, and yet he thinks about money like someone who's never earned any. And it's a very strange.
I do want to talk about how the super wealthy think about money at some point with folks, because it is interesting. And there's, I sometimes get lazy and think, how could you care about money when you have all of the money? And I realize there's plenty of reasons. The more money you have, and in Elon Musk's case, he probably lives and thinks about how much money he's going to need to buy off this country or that country. So let me get to that big question, which everybody is trying to answer. A lot of smart people talking about it. The coalescing billionaire class, aka real ass oligarchy in the United States of America. And one of the analysis I saw, smart people on Chris Hayes' show last night talking about it, is that the interests of many of them, not all of them obviously, but many of them are obviously not just tax cuts and tax incentives for their industries, but regulatory framework that is helpful to their industry, their company, but also AI and crypto were the other 2 and 3, which, of course, I don't know too much about, but their interests there. What are the interests of these billionaires? What do we want to say about this coalescing oligarchy in the USA? Kevin, you first.
Because I rolled my eyes into the back of my head when you said AI and crypto. This is, we've said in the past, and it's not as true it's less true this time than it was last time, about Donald Trump being such an unbelievable idiot that the damage that he can do is blunted by that. The problem now is that the billionaires being on board, they and, with the exception of Elon Musk, they and the people that they surround themselves with are not idiots, and they have real power because they have real money and they have real force. And so the dystopia that we're going to land on, and I'm going to make a bold prediction today on this podcast and say dystopia inevitable. But the version that all of the different science fiction writers have tried to parse out as to where we're headed, the one we're going to end up in is probably going to be determined more by those billionaires than by what Trump does in these moments right now. With regards to AI, with regards to if cryptocurrency becomes not just a way to buy hookers and blow and becomes a financial nuclear weapon in the real actual financial system, like all these things that we won't know until the future. What am I saying? You're right. It's the billionaires. It's the billionaires that are going to be the villains that were behind the curtain while Donald Trump was in front of the curtain talking about meat scratching.
People talk about how inept the administration is, the people that it is appointing. These are big government agencies that you have to have experience in how to navigate. But what Kevin is saying, Bill, sounds like, well, these billionaires know exactly how to get things done, and they're the puppet masters pulling the strings. But, the question is, in general, we're going to be talking and learning a lot about oligarchy, the history of it, how it works, but it is forming, it is coming together. Your thoughts on what Kevin said or anything else?
I think the oligarchic government's already here, although I will tell, it was here in Trump's last term. What's happening now that makes it different is that the big game is AI now. And I've been doing a lot of reading, talking to a lot of people about it, and there is going to be some real effects of AI where people start making real money from it. And it's going to penetrate down into your daily life, and it's going to start taking jobs. Very few people make money from it, and the rest of us lose our jobs as a result of it. So the effect of it could be very dramatic economically, it would seem. Well, this is the point, that there's only going to be a couple of winners. And so with these guys, what's happening right now is that at the casino table, they've got Zuckerberg, because Meta's huge in this. You've got Sam Altman, you've got Bezos, and you've got Musk. It's kind of it. And there's some other players out there, but the guys with really big money who are trying to inject themselves into like Musk or maintain and control it like Zuckerberg, they're in the White House. They're spending all this money. They're doing all these things because what they're terrified of is that when Trump gets in the White House, when he's actually in office, it's a little different. The power differential changes, and he has more power, which means that he can really try to basically pick a winner. Now, is that easy for him to do? No, but he can hurt and help a great deal for any one of these big companies or any of the second-tier ones. So what you're seeing is political power being used by, it's why Musk spent $250 million to help him win, although I would argue whether that was really efficacious or not. These guys are investing in Trump, hoping that he will either not help their enemy or help them. And Musk clearly wants Trump to help him catch up and take over that sector, right? Musk is literally like evil guy twirling his mustache, trying to take over. Somebody like Bezos or Zuckerberg, they're just trying to keep Musk from being, because they're already ahead. So they're trying to keep Musk from, climbing over their backs to get ahead. So, what do you call that? That's a cactocracy. That's a kleptocracy, although it is also a cactocracy, which literally means the rule of shit. But this is a kleptocracy now, where people are going to basically steal the market. And this isn't about changing regulation a little bit so you have an advantage on your oil field in West Texas. This is trying to steal or consolidate the biggest thing that's going to happen in technology in the next 15 years for trillions of dollars.
A lot of people are using the word kakistocracy. I just looked it up. I've never heard it. American kakistocracy, The Atlantic. Reza Magazine. Is America entering her kakistocracy era? The Fulcrum. Trump's kakistocracy invites possible catastrophe. That's hard to say. I don't like this word at all.
So caca, that you've heard a little kid say?
Yeah, I said that when I was little.
It's an Indo-European word. It literally is one of the oldest words in our language.
Oh.
And it means shit, quite literally.
Yeah.
And has, by the way, fascinatingly for like 10,000 years, which I think is amazing.
And that's how America ended, with caca.
We went back to our roots.
And that's how today's conversation is ending, because I got to go do Australian TV and take all the answers you guys just gave me for them.
Please do. Please use them. No footnotes. You don't have to give us any credit. We get paid well enough as it is by you.
I appreciate both of you very much for joining me. We'll pick it up again next week or any other time. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you. This is great.
You.
Cheers, Pete.
All right, there they go. Bill Boyle, Kevin Richberg, Rich Boyle, Boyleberg. What do we like? We have to decide on something. Thunder and Lightning, I like to call them at the Hangout, because they used to argue a lot more, or a little bit more, not badly, but just different viewpoints and so on. So that's why I think I nicknamed them that. But I like Boyleberg or Rich Boyle or Boyle Rich. I don't know. You decide. Take your votes, bumblebees. Thank you very much for listening to today's show. Hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. And if you're not getting the email and maybe you're not subscribed, maybe your credit card got canceled, check on that. Patreon.com right now. That's how I make a living. So if you appreciate what I'm doing each and every day, putting in several hours a day every day on this broadcast, then please sign up for a paid subscription. Write a rating review over at Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube.com/StandUpWithPete. Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, all the rest. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you tonight. Love you guys. Jon Carroll, take us out as you do every day. JonCarroll.org right now.